Welcome back to the podcast. Today we get to talk with John Torrance, who really is an entrepreneur, a writer, a professor, and really helps guide us, especially for those of you that feel like I'm overwhelmed, I've got ADD, I can't focus. John has written a book called Lightning in a Bottle: How to Harness the entrepreneur and their ADD. And I'm really excited about having John on the show. John, welcome.
Thank you, Anthony. Really great to be here.
When we talk about ADD, look, a lot of us are overwhelmed. We're feeling it. I've been diagnosed. People have misdiagnosed me with ADD multiple times in my life. Friends say it all the time. You're like, Anthony, you have ADD, but how do you know if you have ADD or not?
Well, sometimes your spouse might just suggest that you have ADHD, and that may be how you know. Or you might be experiencing difficulty in your business, right? Like just having people not be able to follow your directions, or get confused or frustrated that you're switching priorities all the time. So you've probably experienced it in your social or business life. And that would be your first hint. But then, of course, the only way to know for sure is to get a formal evaluation and a diagnosis.
And how do they do that, right? How do they figure out, is what's going on with me ADD, or am I just drinking off a fire hose of life? What makes that distinction, and how do I figure that out?
Yeah, so you would just talk to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. They'd sit you down for an interview, possibly look over past academic records. And really, it's an assembly of traits. So there might be 10 or 11 traits. And if you have a certain number of them, you qualify for a diagnosis. So for example, if you have high propensity for risk, you're highly proactive, you have a high sense of urgency, low premeditation, low perseverance, high sensation seeking, high impulsivity, and other traits. If you have a combination of those, chances are you'll end up with a diagnosis.
I've my belief, and what I love about this talk, why I couldn't wait to have you on the show, is because, look, I believe this topic is what's plaguing us, right? Our lives go so much faster than ever before. There's never been a time in history where human beings are drinking off a fire hose the way we are. I feel like all of us are facing that, in this now time. Just there's no rest. There's no boredom. We are continuously just being bombarded with ideas and things and topics.
Yeah, and our attention spans seem to be getting smaller and smaller, right? So yeah, the things available for us to consume is mind-boggling, and yeah, it's hard to cut through the noise.
I always say, if you were to hand your cell phone to your great grandfather, right, it would blow their flipping mind, right? I mean, just my great grandfather, if you wanted to, and he was a carpenter and he had a great carpentry company. If you wanted him to come work for you, right, you'd have to go to my grandmother's house. First of all, you'd have to get yourself to my grandmother's house, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to sit down with Anna for probably 3 or 4 hours and talk her into having my grandfather come to your house. And that might take you a month or two. That process, might have taken you a month or two to get my grandfather just to come over and think about working for you. And life moved a lot slower back then, right? Just there was a lot less coming at you. Today, I might get requests 5 times a day for a proposal. Things that happen, I'm expected to answer questions. Someone yesterday asked me, hey, we were in a meeting, where did we leave off about this topic? And I couldn't remember. I had to go back and find my notes. It took me like 2 hours to go find the notes I had for the meeting. And I was going to go back, and I kept getting this question mark. I'm like, take a break here, right? I'm just trying to answer the question for you properly, but I needed to go get my notes to do that. And I just noticed that the world is like that today. There's this, I don't feel like they've been malevolent. They got stuff going on with them, and they're trying to get prepared for the meeting, today. So like, there's a lot of us going that fast.
Yeah, the pace is noticeably faster, right? I mean, the accessibility to information and the pace at which it comes at us is incredible. Yeah, and it's a double-edged sword, right? So on the one hand, it allows us to do incredible things much faster than we ever were able to, right? But on the other side, it creates many distractions, and it's hard to understand what's important. And actually, that's very similar with ADHD traits. So what we found is that the traits involved in ADHD in the context of entrepreneurship, they can be highly functional and highly effective, but for a lot of people, they can be very dysfunctional. So, on one hand, it could help you if you're an entrepreneur, but there's also the side of it that could be really harmful in everyday life. So I think it's the same with the pace of change and the pace of information, right? On one hand, it's really helpful, but on the other hand, it could be detrimental.
So are you saying that I need to learn to ride this horse of ADD, right? Learn to ride and use it and, essentially get a harness on it and learn to ride my ADD or ride our ADD in life?
Yeah, it's more about harnessing and maximizing the upside, right? So just to be clear, it's actually ADHD, and it's the hyperactive component that correlates well with entrepreneurial outcomes. The inattentive type of ADHD doesn't correlate really well. So if you're the hyperactive type of ADHD, that is the one that really works well. And it's just a matter of harnessing the good sides, right? So just as a quick example, one of the traits I mentioned was a high propensity for risk. We know that entrepreneurs are risk takers. I mean, as a matter of fact, the research shows that we're more risk mitigators than risk takers, but we don't often appreciate or see the risk in things that other people might. So we're very optimistic about it. But let's just say you have a high propensity for risk. When it's working for you and it's helpful, you look like you're brave and visionary and go after opportunities where maybe others don't. But when it's not working for you and it's harmful, it could look like you're reckless and just taking wild risks. So on one hand, it could be great, but on the other hand, it could be super harmful, and balancing it and harnessing that to your advantage is the key.
That's interesting. I feel like more and more of us, the TikTok, Instagram, YouTube life trains the brain to be shorter segments, right? I even notice that sometimes, like this morning, I was talking to one of my male friends, and we're talking about planning a weekend this weekend. And we got into the details of it. He's like, I got to go to a meeting. I'm going to go. I'm like, well, look, in order for me to plan, am I going to fly out to your house for the weekend? I'm going to need to think about, hey, do you have anything going on? If I land at 5 o'clock, let's get online. Like the ability to slow down and just take a minute to look at something, that's that's there. So then a lot of times I end up in this spot where like for this weekend, I'm going to plan. I have to take some risk and just book it. And then sometimes it feels incomplete, right? Like I didn't have a complete thought, and that may cause some havoc over the weekend because we didn't properly plan it. And that feels like a very similar thing that happens every day, all day.
Yeah, I think it kind of speaks to the idea of presence, right? So, I mean, you've probably done it too. Like I can be on a Zoom meeting, pretending to be there, sort of digesting it, but then I'm over on my calendar, setting an appointment or firing off an email, somebody I got to get back to, and I'm doing everything but paying attention to the meeting that was already in my calendar. So I think, yeah, I think the idea of presence, like in that example, just you talking to your buddy, trying to focus for a few minutes on planning a visit is a great example. We are so inundated with signals and opportunities for consumption that, yeah, it's hard to stay on the right track sometimes.
So you get this idea. All right, you look at your students. Where does the idea to start to formulate lightning in a bottle as a book? Why do you come up with this? What's the trigger that says I'm going to write this book?
Well, so it's part of my lived experience, right? I've had ADHD my whole life. You don't just develop it in your 40s, but when I was in my 40s, I was having some difficulty running my business because I was, raging, flaming ADHD, and the people around me just couldn't deal with it. So I was working with a CEO coach at the time who suggested maybe I get an evaluation, and they looked back at all my report cards from elementary school, right? And one of the common comments was, if John would just apply himself, he could do so much better. Or, he gets his work done early and then he bothers the other students. And, so the psychiatrist was like, yeah, this has been your whole life and it's just causing you trouble now, which is why you're here talking to me. So, I had the lived experience. I went through it. I figured out how to manage it. And then I started seeing it in my students. So I work with undergraduate students at Syracuse University who are starting companies or growing companies, students in our entrepreneurship program. And as I was watching them, I thought, wow, this is, they have these same traits. And I noticed that the ones who had these traits, who could harness them, were the ones who were really doing well with their companies. Then my office is right next door to a world-renowned academic in entrepreneurship. And I mean, one of the most, cited academics in the world. So I went over and talked to him. I said, hey, look, I'm a member of this organization called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And, my observation is that a lot of members have ADHD. I'm not a doctor or medical doctor, so I can't prove that, but it would be kind of fun to do a little study. And he was all over it. And he said, that's great. What a great sample. So we sent out surveys to 500 YPO members who were in the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Network. And these people have companies that are, I think, maybe 15 million in revenue, more than 15 employees. So they're high functioning entrepreneurs. And what we found was 62% of this population identified with traits consistent with an ADHD diagnosis, where in the general population, you might expect it to be 13. So here we're extremely high functioning CEOs doing really well, yet 62% of them had traits consistent with an ADHD diagnosis. So that made me think, all right, there's something here. And in fact, in Johan Wickland's research, the conclusion is that in the context of entrepreneurship, ADHD can be an advantage, right? And it can be a disadvantage in life, but it can also be an advantage. One example I like to use is the basketball player Yao Ming, right? Yao Ming, he's plus, right? So at that height, in pedestrian traffic or at a music festival, that height is a severe advantage, right? Because he could look over everybody, see where he's going. But if he's trying to buy a bed for normal sized people or sit in a normal sized conference room chair for several hours, his height is a severe disadvantage. And it's the same thing with ADHD in the context of entrepreneurship. So that's why I wrote the book, just so that, entrepreneurs can read about it, and identify the traits that can help and understand when they have to manage it, because they could also hurt.
One of the things I noticed about being an entrepreneur today, even from my early days of entrepreneurship, today, in order to be a business leader, it's not just an entrepreneur and know the business. Like say you want to be a general contractor. Now I'm asked to be a general contractor, but I'm also asked to be a social media expert. I'm asked to, by the way, I'm a father. I got to be a father expert. And then all the new complexities that come with being a father and all the new stuff about how to be a better father than my father was. And, there's so much more dynamic. We've kind of learned a lot more about, just all these little parts and pieces. And now that feels like it's overwhelming. I think that's why by having, not being having that ADHD gives you the ability to go look at multiple things and not panic. Right. And maybe even panic, maybe there's a little bit of panic in there, but like when you talk about writing that, I've somehow or another learned to be able to have multiple things come at me and just know that I'm not going to break.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that speaks to resilience, and resilience is a trait that we find in a lot of entrepreneurs. And, because failure is part of entrepreneurship, and you can be the glass ball that when it drops, it breaks and shatters, or you could be the rubber ball that when you break, it bounces back up. And we find resilience in entrepreneurs. And I think that's really what you're talking about. It's just the ability to deal with a lot at once and recover.
So you capture this way of being, right? I got it. I've got ADD. Now let's start to put into practice the traits and the things I want to be looking for and mastering, because there's also some other things I know that I do. Like one of the things that I've learned to do with myself is I've learned to meditate, but not like most people do. Like the whole idea of meditating for me was horrific. Like I would sit, I actually I have a soundproof. If you come to my home, I live in an old factory, and I have a soundproof meditation room. I call it a prayer room. And in that room, I would, I built it so I could be in there by myself. It'd be me and God and myself. And the truth is I go in there, I sit in there, and asteroids go through my brain the entire time. Right. It's overwhelming. I don't feel much peace. I've not gotten to that place where I've sat in there for long periods of time, and I don't have the comfort that other people get in meditation. So one of the things I made a shift over to was I found it in reading. Right? For me, reading became my first real form of meditation, where I could have one idea at a time. And then, at first I would read, I would forget the first part of the sentence, and I'd be reading. By the time I got to the end of the sentence, I would barely remember the first part, or the end of a paragraph. I couldn't remember the first part of a paragraph. But the more and more I focus on reading and just being completely present to that moment, the more that felt like my first form of meditation. Right.
Yeah, that's great. I can relate to that too. Right. I mean, I did read a lot about meditation. So one of the things I really like is translating academic research into practical applications. And there is a real tangible ROI for entrepreneurs to just get some sort of mindfulness practice, right? So, and if meditation isn't your thing, which you like, when I first started meditating, a 2-minute meditation may as well have been 24 hours for me. I could not do it. But with practice, it gets better, right? But reading is a great meditation. I mean, the idea is that you're focusing on something else, right? And you're kind of paying attention to how you need to pay attention. For me, it's surfing. So when you're out there surfing, you really, like, by definition, you have to pay attention, right? So that's a really great way for me to focus all my energy and attention on one thing. And it also happens to be a lot of fun too. But yeah, mindfulness practice is really important, not only just for ADHD traits and being able to harness the upside, mitigate the downside, but just for overall well-being. There's, physical and mental benefits as well. So if anybody is thinking about adopting some sort of meditation practice, I mean, there's guided meditation apps. There's so one thing that helped me was have you ever seen that Muse device?
Sure.
It's a thing that goes around your head and it gives you biofeedback on how you did during the meditation. And for a guy like me, that was super helpful because, I want to see how did I do, right? And when you're just sitting there meditating, it's hard to understand like what was going on in your brain, even though you might be able to feel it. So now that I have biometric data and feedback, now I can start to work on those things, right? So you can improve what you measure. So for me, that's been really helpful.
Well, I also got like, okay, so with meditation, I noticed a couple things. It was very similar to my diet. Like I would say, hey, I'd want to diet. And then I would notice that I would unconsciously go back to sugar. Like literally it was this addictive behavior where, I couldn't stop myself. And what I noticed was I was literally addicted to sugar.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say and I would say, hey, and I meant it. Like I really literally meant I'm not going to eat, bad today. And then somewhere along the way, my body would unconsciously go and all of a sudden there'd be something sugary in my mouth, something that had sugar, something I knew I didn't want to eat. And I started to notice there's an addiction here. This is very similar to what it was with drugs and alcohol for people, right? That moment it was there. Now I feel like the same thing happens with consciousness, right? That I've actually become addicted to all of the stimulation. Right. I can't sit on the couch and just enjoy TV. There's a phone next to me. I got a conversation going. I'll have 3 or 4 things going and I can't just be in a room. So one of the things I've been trying is no technology Sundays. Right. But
Yeah,
just like the sugar withdrawals I had to go through. And it took me a while to get to that place where I could actually have a sugar-free day and then a sugar-free week. And, where I could really get in there because I'm starting to break the addiction of sugar, right? The same thing happens with stimulation. Like my brain is at least so stimulated to have the truth is I've been terrible at the Sundays, right? My one is every Sunday to put my technology away, have no technology Sundays. And the truth is right now I'm still messing it up. I mean it. Like when I say I want no technology, I like really, I'm not trying to like BS myself. Like I really want to be in a place where I can be present for my wife and my children and be present to the day and not be driven by the 1,000 forms of stimulation that my phone brings me. But what happens is there's that one inside my brain that's like, yeah, you just keep the phone close to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's that dopamine loop, right?
Yeah.
It is an actual addiction, right? We want those feelings. So yeah, I can relate to the Sunday thing. And, I never tried to do an entire day just because I know I wouldn't be able to do it. But what I do is, I do that break in the mornings. So I make a conscious decision not to look at my phone at least until after I've had breakfast, right? So, my usual routine, I wake up, I charge my Aura Ring, because I always have it in airplane mode at night, so I'm not getting bombarded with EMFs, right? So I charge my Aura Ring, go make my coffee, have some water, get outside, do whatever I'm going to do. And then, once I feel like, I'm in a good space, I'll go turn on my phone and see what's going on. But I noticed when I turn my phone on right away in the morning, you don't have any time. There's no on-ramp to your day, right? It's just, bam, you're in traffic going 80 miles an hour. And now your priorities are kind of taking a backseat to everybody else's, priorities and needs because they're reaching out to you. Right. So on Sundays, what I love Sundays because I take the morning just to do some slow work, maybe some creative work, or finish up projects that take a little bit more time than I can afford during the week. But I only do it for a few hours. And then I find that I don't need my tech after that. Like I've done what I need to do. I'm organized for the following week, and then I can truly enjoy Sunday. But if I have to look at my phone, I'll do it. I'm not that stressed about it. But those are some things that have helped me a lot. But this whole idea of consumption, like you talked about sugar, like what we put in our mouths from a consumption perspective is almost as important, if not more important, than what we put in through our ears and eyes, in terms of just managing ADHD traits. So yeah, consumption and the speed and the opportunity and the access to things to consume is incredible these days.
Hey, why'd you do the aura? Talk to me about that. What made you, what pulled you into it, and how's it working for you?
Well, it's amazing. So I was a Whoop guy for a couple years. I really liked I liked their data visualizations, and I liked their focus on athletic performance. I thought that was kind of cool because I'm a novice triathlete. I like to do. There's this one triathlon I do every year, just as a benchmark, right? And my goal is to get a little bit faster every year. And if I can do that, then I'll feel like I'm pretty happy. And I love the Whoop for that. But the more I started researching EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies, and the light and everything, the Whoop band is on your wrist, and 100% of your blood supply goes through your wrist every so often. I forget the time. And, we're just big bags of water. And I was bombarding my blood several times an hour with EMFs. So I started talking to, I've got a longevity doctor, and then I've got a good friend who's an expert in visible and invisible light spectra. And he was like, yeah, Oura Ring's probably better because not all the blood flow goes through that one finger, and you can put it in airplane mode overnight and all this. So it's a little bit more focused on sleep and recovery than it is athletic performance. But I don't like wearing things on my wrist. Like it drives me nuts. And when I was surfing, I found that the Whoop band was kind of clumsy, even though you can put a little thing over it to keep it on. I found the Aura just a better form factor for me.
And the data and content that you're getting from that, how's that helping?
Oh, it's amazing. So, for example, I know I've got the data to prove it now that the earlier in the day I eat my last meal, the better my sleep architecture and metrics are going to be. So my sweet spot biologically seems to be 3:30 p.m. If I can eat my last meal by 3:30, wow, I am going to get incredible REM, incredible deep sleep. My HRV is going to be up. I won't be tossing and turning that much. Now, it's a hard thing to do in practice, right? I mean, to eat dinner at 3:30. I mean, I'm the guy who, if you want to go out to dinner, I'm like, hey, how's a 4:00 reservation, right? Like I'm not that much fun anymore, but I know that's super helpful for me. Likewise, I know that if I have even one drink of alcohol within 2 hours of going to bed, I may fall asleep relatively quickly, but my sleep architecture is a complete mess. I'm not going to sleep very well. My HRV is going to be really low. I'm going to be tossing and turning. So if I am going to drink alcohol, the takeaway for me is I'm much better off day drinking. so I have time to metabolize it, right? But it has changed my behavior in some considerable ways because, we know alcohol is a neurotoxin, for example, right? But it's so ingrained in our social fabric that we drink, right? There's all sorts of opportunities to drink. But now with the data, like, irrefutable hard data that shows me the effects on my body of that alcohol, it's much easier for me to consciously make decisions that are better for my body. And if I'm focusing on my physical, mental, and spiritual well-being, I'm going to perform better as an educator, as an entrepreneur, as a father, as a husband, and so on.
Well, I think you had something that's really I'm in the middle of right now. As I've reinvented my day, I've reinvented, getting up early. I'm an early bird now. I spend a lot of time, quiet time. And then that nighttime, sometimes I've said the same thing. I'm even boring, right? Because I used to be this crazy partier. I'd be out all night. If you went out with me, I was the guy who invented craziness at night. In fact, I was literally the guy who, drove it, and I would make things up, and just the things I would do because I wanted. It may be some that was drivers. It was my lifestyle and whatever those were, right? Or like whatever those things were that were drivers, and it looked great. And for some point that worked, but then my life changed right? And I wanted some other priorities, right? Like building a family, building a career, building the companies that I grow. Today, I can 10x whatever I did at those younger party days, which was, I'm not, I don't want to like look at it and go, well, that was terrible. Because the truth was I had fun,
Yeah.
but just life switched.
Yeah.
Now I've been playing this game, and this is really literally top of mind topic because I'm reinventing what it means to go to bed early and still have a life that's a lot of fun, right? To challenge it. And I've been like this whole week, I've been in that whole space of, all right. So this weekend, my wife invited one of our great friends who's a big caterer in town, invites us to this beautiful party, right? It's a beautiful Chicago party. Every year we get to go, and it's fancy. Everybody was dressed in white this year, and really a fun party. But I just noticed myself going, look, I don't want to sit around with people just drinking all day. And during the day, I was kind of communicating with my wife, like, yeah, I don't know. She's like, come on, you're gonna hang out with our friends. You sound a little ungrateful. And I'm like, no, but it's just I'm bored with sitting around drinking at night. It just doesn't, sitting around up all night. I know the next day kind of messes up my biorhythm. Look, when I don't get to bed early, and then especially when I eat all that different food. And so in that moment, I noticed that I wanted to reinvent how I start to do this. Right. And that next night we had some friends invite us over to dinner, and the same thing, there's usually a lot of food, people drinking. And same thing. I was like, well, but how could we reinvent going over someone's house? Now, number one was I'm okay with going over earlier. Right. And I like to really create with them going over earlier and leave a little earlier because first of all, it was Sunday night. It's the start of my week. But then we started saying, what if we did something a little bit different? Like, what if we reinvented, like, what if we brought something from our house over to their house and hid it? Right? Like we made this like little game. I made this like little game about going over. So, and my daughter got into it. She's 11. She's like, oh, Dad, I got a great, she found this book and she's like, I'm going to hide the book. And she put it in her backpack and she she goes, I'll pretend like I have to do homework. And so she gets there and she's in their living room and she's got her backpack out. She puts her homework out and she's like, Dad, I got the book. She's hide the book. She's like, I got the book. Right. And she starts to go put it in their bookshelf. And the lady's coming out our friend's coming out to set the table. I'm like, oh, she's coming. And she just barely gets it there. And as the friends come in, the book's about to fall. We're like, all like, oh my God, they're going to catch us. And she leaves and goes back to the kitchen. We slide the book in and we're at dinner. We're like, hey, what do you guys think about playing this game as, friends? We're kind of reinvent, kind of some new stuff to do when we have these dinner parties. And lady's like, there's no way you could ever hide a book, hide anything in my house. I would know in 15 seconds. And yet the entire time the book was less than 12 inches from her head. Right. So, and we're inside just laughing inside. Yeah. And I guess the reason why I say the story is therein lies what I believe is our next journey as humans, that we got to, and I don't know where this happened, 60s, 70s, 50s, I don't know where, maybe it was 20s, where booze gets invented and we kind of stopped at creative. We stopped at, we're going to go to someone's house, we'll drink until people are drunk, or just drunk enough to get home, right? And then we'll stop. And that became like a night out. Yeah. And I'm not saying that I don't love my friends. I love hanging out with my friends. I love it. But it feels a little bit like we've been there, done that. And as we start to look at where we're going, right? You made mention that you have a longevity coach, right? Yeah. You have the things that we are bringing to our life to really create a future that's even more dynamic than ever before, right? This is the stuff that I think is exciting about reinventing a future, reinventing the ideas and the structures that are there. And maybe some of them don't serve us anymore, right? Drinking messes up. You know that when you drink, you're sleep shot, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's just, I mean, it's natural in our life cycle, right? Like, when I was young, I was never really good at staying up super late, but I'd like to go out and be wild and have parties and all that kind of stuff. Right. But I think as you get older, different things bring you joy. Right. And I think that's really important. And to the longevity thing, it doesn't make sense to me to spend a lifetime trying to create wealth only to piss it away in your last decade because you're dealing with chronic disease that you could have managed, right? So I want to be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor long into my life. And I don't want doctors keeping me alive with pills and machines longer. I'd rather die earlier, but be vital and vibrant right up until the day I die, not be a burden on my family, and be able to enjoy everything about life because I created that, right? And part of creating it shouldn't be killing myself. And that, to me, that's been a really important thing lately.
Well, that's what pharmaceuticals did, right?
Yeah.
Pharmaceuticals had us, look, we're getting sick earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're getting sick, but pharmaceuticals and that world has managed to keep us alive. But most of us are sick for a long period of time. I love
Yeah.
what you said. Look, I want to be well into the minute I die. Like it'd be
Mm-hmm.
great to be, used up, dead. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
The idea, like seriously, I would, if
Exactly.
that went quick, but I had a nice, long, beautiful
Yeah.
life that was used well. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I always laugh with my kids. I'm like, look, you're going to sneak in, and excuse me, I'm going to cuss. You're going to sneak into the cemetery in the middle of the night, and you're going to take the Dremel out, and you're going to put "used up motherfuckers" on my tombstone. Now, maybe someday I'll change the bad language, but I always thought it was funny to use the bad language because I just want them to know that I lived. I want us to live this life to the end, right? This
Yeah.
massive adventure that we have. The ADHD entrepreneur is building something, right? They have an idea and they're growing it. And in the face of all these things to grow it, all of the impact that's coming at them, like learning to harness that energy that comes with today's society. I love where you're at with it. Like, look, you're going to put a harness on this thing, and you're going to learn to ride this gift that you have, and bring it. This is your winning formula.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and anybody can apply it too. It's just a matter of getting there yourself, because you can't preach it. You can't convert somebody. They have to be ready to do it. They have to experience it for themselves. And yeah, and that's why I like the biomarkers and biotrackers. So last summer I was probably hooked up to more biotrackers than I've ever been. I had a continuous glucose monitor. I had my Oura Ring. I had my Garmin watch. I had my Muse band. I had all these things just because I really was interested in what is going on in my body when I do certain things. Because like you said, I just want to live really well until I die. I mean, like the best way to go would be just in my sleep, after a really long life, and, not cause anybody any hassle or hardship, just go out on top. Right. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that?
For sure. And like, that's the most interesting part about it is that, to get to a place where you start going, I want to learn to do this better. And you start to
Mm-hmm.
put all these devices on, right? In that moment, you're starting to do the work, right? You may not have all the answers in the moment, right? First time I put a glucose monitor on and I could see the impact of the things I was eating to my blood sugar.
Yeah.
It was like, it was refreshing. Like I
Yeah.
could go, oh yeah, great. Go on Sunday morning and have 4 bagels or whatever. I don't eat 4
Right.
bagels, but, we'd go to this restaurant and it'd be a bagel and a pastry, and they had these Jewish little rugulas, and everyone, oh my God, I had to have one of those before I leave.
Yeah.
And you look at your blood sugar and go, wow, you just spiked, right?
Yeah.
That breakfast just caused you a spike, and you wonder why on Sunday afternoon you're lethargic, or why an hour later you're lethargic, you're out, you want to go take a nap,
Yeah.
and your beautiful day together with your family just got interrupted because of the things that you ate for breakfast. And that's impact, right? Now I can look at cause
Totally.
and effect and impact to the relationship with my wife and children, right? And now,
Yeah.
look, I could not just impact to my body, but I could look at, all right, if I want to be energetic and engaging and full of life and vitality with my family, the things that go in my body, you can see cause and effect there.
Yeah, and it goes to all relationships, right? Not just your family, but your employees, your vendors, your customers. So yeah, if you have a poor diet, which let's face it, almost everybody in America does, right? We have the standard American or SAD diet with ultra processed foods, and we're getting sicker. We're getting more inflamed. Like you said, pharmaceutical companies are loving life because we just need more and more pills to keep us alive longer with chronic disease. But that sort of focus on your body and your physical health has a direct correlation to entrepreneurial outcomes, right? If you're healthier and a better person, you're going to do better in life and also business. So that's why it's been something of a passion for me the last couple of years, just helping especially young entrepreneurs who haven't had much experience with anything except the first 20 years of life, just helping them really focus on that. And honestly, I've seen this new generation probably more in tune and focused on these types of things than I know my generation was.
That's
Like
right.
if I knew this stuff when I was their age, I think I would be, in much better shape now,
Well, I mean, think how exciting that is. Like my daughter, we're walking through a mall the other day, and my son was with me, but my daughter and my son were with me, and they were talking about, look at the ads on there. There was that Ozempic. I mean, wait, I'm not trying to call out Ozempic or whatever. There's another
Yeah.
whatever the other drug is on that, and it's like my daughter started talking about it. It's like, Dad, every one of these pillars in this mall has that drug on it, and
Yeah.
it's like, and you can look around at us when you talk about we're inflamed, right? We are getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
The stuff that we're putting in our mouth is affecting us there, and then we start going, all right, in order to counteract that, let's take a drug that that suppresses our appetite.
Mm-hmm.
And most people that are taking that to success are overtaking it. They're not taking it by prescription. They're taking
Yeah. Off
some
label. Yeah.
off label and something X to what they're supposed to be doing. And you got to look at what's the long term effect on that. And so it was fun watching them react to that. And I think that's an exciting time that maybe people give young people a hard time. And I think more than ever before, they're actually waking up and they're seeing some
Totally
stuff
agree.
that's cool.
Yeah, I agree with that. Excuse me. Yeah, like the students I work with, for example, like mental health is not as stigmatized, right? Like imagine when we were younger and we were talking about mental health, we would have got beaten up or something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like people would have
Right.
thought we were literally nuts. But yeah, they embrace mental health. They understand how important it is. They're not afraid to talk about it. They're not afraid to prioritize it. I was amazed the other day. I was talking to a student who also wears an Oura ring. It was talking about alcohol and food. I mean, when I was that age, I would drink as much as possible all day, every day almost, right? It was just what you did. It was a sport almost.
Yeah.
I think students now are much more dialed into the effects of it. And it's really encouraging, really cool to see.
Well, also, no one talked about the emotional impact of life. So we got to
Yeah.
drugs and alcohol, and we're like, oh, there was that easy button, right?
Yeah.
It was that easy button to relax. I mean, we weren't trained. There was no, they pulled us aside for English. They pulled us aside for math. They pulled us aside for history, but no one pulled us aside and said, hey, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to have these things you don't know how to do about yourself. And today we're dealing with mental health. I'm not saying we're there yet. I still think we got a way to go. And what's going to be fun is what it looks like in 20 years. I really am excited about where we're going. And we still have some more to work to do on all fronts. The sleep, eat, workout, all of those are going to come into some way better awarenesses. But today they're really doing a great job of working on the awareness those awarenesses that we didn't have. That's where your uncle went in the back room and put a shotgun in his mouth. They didn't talk about what was going on, right?
Yeah. No, but it is getting better. But it's an uphill battle, right? Because the environment is such that all these interests are working against them, right? So the food that's accessible to young students on a campus environment or anywhere else, I mean, it's way too easy to buy and consume food that really isn't even food, right? It's hard to eat well. It's more expensive to eat well. And then you get sick and then you have to take a pill that, maybe addresses the one thing you want to take the pill for, but we all know there's going to be other side effects. I mean, I don't know that much about Ozempic and that class of drugs, but I would be shocked if we didn't find out in a few years that, actually, it's not that good for you, right? But they'll have a pill for that too. I'm quite sure.
We know here, like fundamentally at a systemic level, we know what's going to happen. We know that there's impact. You can't mess with this biological soup that we are and not have some backside. Let's talk. I think one of the things you've done that's amazing, and I want to talk about your company Sprout and just kind of the support network that you are doing and that you are for the entrepreneurial journey. And let's talk about how how all that kind of plays in together and how that network and supporting the entrepreneur.
Yeah, so I'm really lucky that in my professional life I have two sides, right? I work at an amazing university in a top-ranked entrepreneurship department, teaching new venture creation and all all the things around that. And on the other side, I also am lucky enough to have a growing, thriving business, and I find that by teaching entrepreneurial concepts, it strengthens my ability to be an entrepreneur, right? I have better entrepreneurial outcomes because I teach it. And the better entrepreneurial outcomes also translate into more interesting lectures and examples and teaching. So it's a really cool virtuous loop. My business, I've got a couple partners, and we work with young kids with disabilities. So our sweet spot is birth to 5 years old, kids who are late walkers, late talkers, cerebral palsy, autism, any kind of developmental delay that a young kid might have. And we provide those services in an outpatient clinic, a home health program, and a series of integrated preschools where half the kids have disabilities, half are typically developing. And it's super rewarding. I mean, it is a really feel-good business. It's often hard because we're the first ones delivering news to parents sometimes that their parents might have a developmental delay or disability. But on the other hand, we get amazing feedback and just some heartwarming emails as the kids grow older and hit their goals. So that's really fun. And then on the university side, yeah, I get to work with students who are starting companies or growing companies and raising money and winning pitch competitions.
Cool.
So one of the cool things I did this past summer was, we noticed, and this is hard data. Like there's survey data that show that students nowadays are feeling less connected in their campus communities, and they're more anxious and less feelings of overall happiness. So, I just created a course called Entrepreneurial Wellbeing, and we dove into how to prioritize your well-being, mental, physical, and spiritual health, and what the ROI is in your entrepreneurial endeavors to focusing on those. And it was interesting for for a serious business school to think about things like that, right? Like well-being and business. Maybe a decade ago that we wouldn't even have had that conversation. I'd be laughed out of the room. But our administration was super supportive of it, and they understand that the students are struggling, and it was such a fun course to put together and to teach. And it was really great to see the students just, really dive into this and absorb it. Really rewarding.
What are the challenges, and give me some examples of how you put that into play?
You mean developing the course or
Yeah.
just teaching
Yeah,
it?
teach it in both.
Yeah, well, so when you're proposing new courses, there's got to be a reason. It's got to fit into the curriculum somehow, right? So it's not like I was teaching a new course on finance or supply chain or something that very easily aligns with a business school curriculum. This was more something that it was applicable to all students and would provide the strong foundation for them to perform as a student in a serious business school. So it was really just making that case. And it wasn't even a hard case to make because everybody in the school kind of gets it now. I mean, we know that our students, especially after COVID, have a little more anxiety. They have more pressures and all the things we talked about earlier with the signals and, the opportunities for consumption. It's affecting these kids, right? And there's a balance. Like they want to disconnect, but their social capital kind of depends on their ability to stay connected, right? So they're in a really tough spot. I think they're navigating it pretty well, but anything we could do to help and support them, I was all on board, and I was really lucky to have an administration that was supportive too.
That's awesome. Look, that's the joy I have for the work that you do. Like we were breaking through new paradigms, and we're looking at it and noticing, hey, look, your social capital is really starting to affect your ability to be comfortable, your ability to be present, your ability to the anxiety that's happening and how that's checking us all out.
Mm-hmm.
And start to look at, all right, what can we do about it? Like, what might be some practices that we can do to start to, and put them in. I don't get that we'll get them all right away, but I think
No,
that we'll
of course
continue.
not. Yeah.
Yeah. we'll continue to build on them. And as we start to articulate those and start to really find better and better distinctions as to the cause and effect of each of the items, we'll start to find better ways of addressing that and, overall, counteracting that. That sense of presence is, I was in Nepal last November, and one of these monks said, I was in a silent retreat, and one of the monks said to me, "You folks are just addicted to being busy."
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, and part of me gets it. And the other part of me says, and all right, look, I was in a country that was, a few thousand years old, and where they are compared to where we are, we've done a lot in the last 250 years on this planet, on the United States. We have built a beautiful, amazing society that's maybe a little bit overwhelmed, and there's some effect to that, right? But at the same time, we've built an amazing country, and we got to be proud of that. So there's both, and I don't know that we'll ever slow it down, but as we start to get practices to be able to ride it, like you talk about, get that lightning in a bottle. I think it's a great way of looking at it. That's what's such a fresh approach to it is, don't try to run from it. Like, let's try to harness it and bring it into fruition and use it to our benefit.
Yeah.
Good job. Good job with that book. Anything else you want to tell the world out there about the book? If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So you can get the book on Amazon. It's called Lightning in a Bottle, How Entrepreneurs Can Harness Their ADHD to Win. You can find me at my website, johnmtorrens.com. And we're in the early stages of recording episodes for a new podcast called The Total Entrepreneur, Mind, Body, Spirit, where we deal with all the things we just started talking about. We're going to start releasing episodes on November 1st. So really excited for that.
Awesome. We'll make sure we put links to all those down below. And audience, as always, here, buy the book, right? Just let's support John and the work that he's doing. It's great work. It really is the fabric of our future growth. Putting these practices, these skill sets in a world that's more overwhelming than ever. I think it'll be great. And John, I'm just so grateful to have you on the show.
Yeah, likewise. This is a great conversation. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Audience members, we noticed that last week we had, again, another amazing breakthrough week with audience members, and the number of downloads you guys had. YouTube was nuts. The amount of people that downloaded just blows me away how we're doing. Thank you for all that. I've also noticed that a lot of you guys made it to the end of the show without being subscribers. If you could take a second and like and subscribe, it means the world to Alyssa and Joe and all of our crew in the background that put this podcast together every day. They work tirelessly to find great guests like John. And if you could just take a second and like and subscribe now and tell your friends about it, I would be so grateful. And as always, thanks for listening.